discussion, and that'll be an exciting time for us, but we believe that this is a good direction for the city.
Can I ask you, what is the, it looks like the, can you talk about the east and west borders of Highland and what corridors are within that? I mean, once you tell me the east and west, I guess we could talk about that, but.
Well, let's see, what do we have here? Well, the eastern is largely I-35.
Yeah.
Western, Scott, you see the western generally?
Yeah, some of that's Duval. I think largely going through Hyde Park. It's, you know, and one important element of this, when we started with the Central Corridor, that was a way to focus our efforts. That was not intended to limit our study area. As you see that when we moved into the sub-corridors, they extend beyond the Central Corridor. So again, ways to focus our efforts, not limit them. And so when we start looking in more detail at these two top priority sub-corridors, as well as the core, again, they're not going to limit our efforts, but they are going to focus them. So that's why it's a big fat line. It's not a hard and fast. I mean, when we did data collection, there is a real border there, but as we move into phase 2, that's going to shift as we look at logical termini, destinations within these sub-corridors that we want to serve.
Yeah. By having two ERC and Highland, I mean, the impression we've gotten up to now over the last 3 years or so is that they're, you know, getting enough money to go south of the river and, you know, I mean, would there be enough money available to do both of those at the same time?
That's a great question. And in fact, one of the things that we didn't want to be limited by in our recommendation was a preconceived idea of how much money we would need to have for this. We have very conservative cost estimates at this point in time. As we move into phase 2 in the alignment discussion, we'll be sharpening our focus on those cost estimates. What we want to do, I kind of call it the piece of macaroni on a string. The idea is, where is that sweet spot in this alignment that we want to be able to identify that best alignment. So
Macaroni on what?
Macaroni on a string, as opposed to a pearl on a string. It's a little longer. But the idea here too, and keep this in mind, if we are going to put a project forward that is going to be successful for federal funding, we'd want to include as much of our capital investment in that project, the big ticket items, to get the feds to pay for up to half of that investment. So we don't want to avoid that river crossing. We know it's an expensive option. We're going to be looking at cheaper options if we can, but we don't want to avoid that issue or we don't want to forget about that issue. That's an opportunity to have the feds participate in half of the funding of any crossing of the lake that we would make.
And I'll add that we considered that as a significant constraint, crossing Lady Bird Lake. Nevertheless, East Riverside, you know, which is kind of, you know, that's part of its evaluation, that's part of its scoring, still finished on top. It's still the top corridor, sub-corridor, despite some of the obstacles in getting there.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, if that happened to be 1 billion or 1.2 billion, then your local match starts to be a much bigger number. That's the reason I'm asking.
Well, we have not. There has been a number that's been floated out there, but that has not been a hard and fast number, and so we didn't want to be limited by any preconceived ideas of what that is. We'll have to look at bonding capacity. We'll have to look at the capacity for the appetite the community has for a project. And so one of the things we'll probably be looking at is we'll be looking at a longer alternative that may be a bigger ask and a shorter alternative that would be a little smaller ask. We felt that that gave us the flexibility moving forward to identify the best project possible to compete for federal dollars.
You talked just a moment ago about the decision-making process that went into choosing these two sub-corridors. And I think a lot of local transit advocates are going to look at this and be disappointed because there's been a lot of push for something to run up the Guadalupe-Lamar corridor. And even it looked like in your 3 open houses relating to this, that was consistently the most highest rated corridor for investment. So could you talk more in depth about what the decision-making process was like that led you to choose these 2 corridors over, say, Lamar?
Well, Lamar is a great corridor, but what we found is that there are several great corridors out there. And in fact, the Lamar corridor it's been recognized as being a significant corridor for transit needs and transit ridership, and that's why the BRT project is moving forward there. But one of the things that we were asked to do was to do a data-driven process, to really go take that step back and do a data evaluation of the entire central corridor and look at all of the subcorridors. We didn't throw Lamar out because there's a future investment there. We wanted to compare that on the same basis as we looked at all other directions here. What we found is it does score in the middle of the pack, but we did find that Highland and East Riverside, given the information that's out there, really did emerge as the top corridors or subcorridors for the next investment.
And so what sort of information was that, though? Is that, what numbers were you looking at when you made those decisions?
Well, we have, and you'll see in your efforts, we have about 44, 45 different measures of information that we have compiled. We've organized those around 11 indices to be able to address challenges such as the congestion issues, the growth issues, the core reinforcement, and other factors. But one of the things that we didn't just look at existing ridership, we looked at projected population growth, we looked at projected employment growth and where those trends are actually emerging. We looked at economic development. Where is economic development occurring? And again, so when you look at what's happening, say, in Lamar versus what's happening in some of these other areas, you're finding that some of these other sub-corridors, there's a lot happening in those corridors as well.
The medical school is actually in the central corridor, right?
Yes, it's within the core.
Yes.
Right.
So Highland is on the side of the central core that the medical school will be. What influence did the medical school and the potential innovation district, et cetera, have on that choice?
One of the things that we did was, for comparison purposes, we did not look at the core. The core, we said, would be served, regardless of which sub-corridor or which direction we would head. So basically, we looked at the geographic areas that are outlined here in the area. So we compared just the Highland Corridor against Miller and Lamar and the others. So any of the investments, such as the 39-story apartment tower over on Trinity, that's in the core, but it didn't positively influence any of the other subcorridors. So it would have been in the denominator. It would have basically canceled everything out.
Kyle, let me ask a question.
Because the core...
Two questions which pretty much all of Austin is asking right now. Number one is, are you building a system here which people will want to ride? And number two, having said that, will this cut down on congestion?
First question, will people ride? Yes. My belief is that based on the information, you want to be able to go where the people are. Not only where they live, but where they work, where they play. And what we are seeing is a tremendous amount. You already have this happening on East Riverside. You also see it in Highland area. There's strong transit ridership in each one of those corridors. What we are seeing, for example, on the development patterns is tremendous amount of development out the East Riverside area near Pleasant Valley. Tremendous amount of development up in the Highland area. So I believe that the transit ridership will be very strong. Your second question about congestion. Congestion is always a challenge. It's a big challenge here. Transit really responds to congestion. If there were no congestion, it really doesn't provide a lot of motivation for people to get out off the highway and jump on transit. So one of the things that we recognize as transit professionals is that we're not going to solve the congestion problem with one investment. That is a multimodal solution that we need to address. And so we will be a part of that solution with the managed lanes that are going forward, with the commuter rail projects that are going forward. But this project alone will not solve the congestion problem. It will be an opportunity for people as we look up the Highland subcorridor, for example. It would be an intercept opportunity for us to be able to attract people off of the I-35 to be able to get some of the other destinations rather than continue their trip on I-35.
Can you forecast a percentage of the congestion then that it will either hold stable or cut?
No, I can't project that at this point. This has really been more of a geographic area of analysis to look at characteristics which are favorable to high-capacity transit investments. Once we start looking at a specific project, we can get into a little bit better understanding of what that projection would be.
I'm trying to think between I-35 and Duval and going up towards Highland Mall, where all this tremendous development, I can't think of any development going on.
Right up at the mall area is.
Well, yeah, you have Highland Mall, you have